Hey guys, welcome back to Mike Reads the World and my third poetry video on this channel, and bem-vindo a todos os brasileiros. Welcome all the Brazilians who are now making up about half of my viewership according to my statistics. You're very welcome and thank you for checking out the channel. Today I'm actually reading a Portuguese poet, Fernando Pessoa, who I also did a video on his book of Disquiet, which for the longest time was the most viewed video on my channel by a lot, and I'll link that in the description if you're interested in. But I did it very early on and it was very fascinating, but I didn't really fall in love with Fernando Pessoa until I read and hear his heteronym Alberto Caeiro. And I'm going to be reading some of my favorites from Alberto Caeiro, which were written between 1911 and 1915 in the original Portuguese. This is actually a bilingual Spanish and Portuguese anthology of multiple of Fernando Pessoa's heteronyms. I'm just going to be focusing on Alberto Caeiro today, but I will do more if his other heteronyms move me in such interesting and powerful ways. I am not kidding. It was... I was able to sort out the meaning of all of the poems just by using the Spanish, since I am fluent in Spanish. But now when I read these out loud in Portuguese, you'll have to excuse me because sometimes I confuse the pronunciation of Spanish with Portuguese, and it's definitely going to be Brazilian Portuguese, not Portuguese from Portugal. So those are two caveats, but I do want to read them to the best of my ability here in the original Portuguese. And it was when I got to number 4 of O Guardador de Rebanhos from Alberto Caeiro, number 4, that this is... I actually can't think of a poem that immersed me this much in its meaning, the philosophy, and I'm going to read it first in Portuguese, and then if I have to take most of the video just to discuss this poem, that's okay, because it's truly one of my favorites ever, and I'm going to talk about why. So here we go. Bear with me because it is a long poem. A metafísica bastante em não pensar em nada. O que penso eu do mundo? Sei lá o que penso do mundo. Se eu adoecesse, pensaria nisso. Que ideia tenho eu das coisas? Que opinião tenho sobre as causas e os efeitos? Que tenho eu meditado sobre Deus e a alma? E sobre a criação do mundo? Não sei. Para mim, pensar nisso é fechar os olhos. E não pensar. E correr as cortinas de minha janela, mas ela não tem cortinas. O mistério das coisas, sei lá o que é mistério. O único mistério é ver quem pense no mistério. Quem está ao sol a fecha os olhos, começa a não saber o que é o sol, e a pensar muitas coisas cheias de calor, mas abre os olhos e vê o sol. E já não pode pensar em nada, porque a luz do sol vale mais que os pensamentos de todos os filósofos e de todos os poetas. A luz do sol não sabe o que faz e por isso não erra e é comum e boa. Metafísica? Que metafísica tem aquelas árvores, a de serem verdes e copadas e de terem ramos, e a de dar fruto na sua hora, o que não nos faz pensar, a nós que não sabemos dar por elas, mas que melhor metafísica que a delas, que é a de não saber para que vivem, nem saber que o não sabem. Constituição íntima das coisas, sentido íntimo do universo, tudo isto é falso, tudo isto não quer dizer nada. É incrível que se possa pensar em coisas dessas. É como pensar em razões e fins. Quando o começo da manhã está raiando e pelos lados das árvores um vago ouro lustroso vai perdendo a escuridão. Pensar no sentido íntimo das coisas é acrescentado como pensar na saúde, ou levar um copo à água das fontes. O único sentido íntimo das coisas é elas não terem sentido íntimo nenhum. Não acredito em Deus porque nunca ouvi. Se ele quisesse que eu acreditasse nele, sem dúvida que viria falar comigo e entraria pela minha porta dentro, dizendo-me: aqui estou. Isto é talvez ridículo aos ouvidos de quem, por não saber que é olhar para as coisas, não compreende quem fala delas, como o modo de falar que reparar para elas ensina. Mas se Deus é as flores e as árvores, e os montes e sol e o luar, então acredito nele, então acredito nele a toda a hora, e a minha vida é toda uma oração e uma missa, e uma comunhão com os olhos e pelos ouvidos. Mas se Deus é as árvores e as flores, e os montes e o luar e o sol, para que lhe chamo é Deus? Chamo-lhe flores e árvores e montes e sol e luar, porque se ele as fez para eu o ver, sol e luar e flores e árvores e montes, se ele me aparece como sendo árvores e montes e luar e sol e flores, é que ele quer que eu o conheça como árvores e montes e flores e luar e sol. E por isso eu obedeço-lhe, que mais sei eu de Deus que Deus de si próprio. Obedeço-lhe a viver espontaneamente, como quem abre os olhos e vê. E chamo-lhe luar e sol e flores e árvores e montes, e amo-o sem pensar nele. E penso-o vendo e ouvindo, e ando como ele a toda a hora. And now, this poem starts out saying, there's enough metaphysics to think of nothing, to not think of anything. It's hard to translate that first line. Like, there are enough metaphysics to not think of anything. What do I think of the world? What do I know what I think of the world? If I get sick, I'd think it. What idea do I have of things? What opinion of causes and effects? That I've meditated on God and the soul and on the creation of the world? I don't know. For me, thinking of it is closing the eyes and not thinking. It's closing the curtains of my window, but it doesn't have curtains. The mystery of things? What do I know what the mystery is? The only mystery is that there is someone who thinks of the mystery, who is in front of the sun and closing the eyes, starts not to know what is the sun, and to think many hot things, but opening the eyes and seeing the sun, and can't think of anything, because the light of the sun is worth more than the thoughts of all the philosophers and all the poets. The light of the sun doesn't know what it does, and for that it's never wrong, and it's communal, and it's good. Metaphysics? What is metaphysics? What metaphysics do the trees have of being green and having branches and giving fruit in their time? And what they make us think of, us, that we don't know how to acknowledge them. But what better metaphysics than theirs, which is not knowing why they live, and not knowing why they know, and not knowing that they don't know. Intimate constitution of things, intimate sense of the universe, all this is false. All this doesn't want to say anything. It's incredible that one can think in these things. It's like thinking of reasons and ends when the principle of tomorrow is, I think it's scratching, and I don't really know how to translate that. No, it's yeah, I don't know how to translate that. And where the trees are, a lustrous vagueness destroying the darkness. Thinking of the intimate sense of things is superfluous, like thinking of health or bringing a glass of water to the fountain or to the source. The only intimate sense of things is not having an intimate sense. Now here's where I feel it gets really powerful and that it hit me the most. And pardon my really stuttered translation. I'm really doing this on the spot, and I'm translating from actually the Spanish side of it. So in my head on the spot. I don't believe in God because I've never seen him. If he wanted me to believe in him, surely he would have come to speak with me and would have entered by my door saying, "Here I am." Maybe this sounds ridiculous to the ears of those who, for not knowing what's looking at things, can't comprehend people who speak of them in the way of speaking that teaches how to observe them. But if God is the flowers and the trees and the mountains and the sun and the light of the moon, then I believe in him. Then I believe in him at all times. In all my life is a prayer and a mass and a communion with the eyes and the ears. But if God is the trees and the flowers and the mountains and the light of the moon and the sun, why do I call him God? I call him flowers and trees and mountains and the light of the moon, because if he did it so that I could see sun and moon and flowers and trees and mountains, if he's appearing to me in the figure of trees and mountains and the light of the moon and sun and flowers, and that's how he wants me to know him, then he wants me to know him as trees and mountains and flowers and the light of the moon and sun, and I obey this. How could I know more about God than himself? I obey him living spontaneously like someone opening their eyes and looking. I call him moon and sun and flowers and trees and mountains. I love him without thinking of him. I think of seeing and hearing, and I go with him at all times. It's the most spiritual way. I'm going to turn up the light a little bit. It's the most spiritual way I can imagine of expressing materialism, is the first thing I thought. And my mind was radically overturned reading this. And I found myself confronted with like something I think I believe to be true, a reality I believe to be true, like that I've, the sort of living like this is all there is. If there was a God, then why wouldn't he present himself like the mountains do and the moon and the sun? And if those things are him and his creation, and then why don't we just call them those things? What's wrong with that? With just seeing them and calling them what they are? I don't know. I can't say it better than the poem in its original language, and after trying to translate, it doesn't come off the same way. It doesn't come off the same way because, one, you're forced to give like a gender to God, at least. I don't know. I'm not a translator. I'm just doing my best to try to communicate the message, but I think the original Portuguese really does it best. And that's why I read it first. So you could, even through my not so great Portuguese, maybe try to do this. But I really engaged with this sort of on a, it was last night, and I read the entirety of Alberto Caeiro in pretty much, well, 2 nights. Alberto Caeiro. But I want to continue reading a few more because there's actually a series of the poem number 5 that follows this one has something very similar to say. Pensar em Deus é desobedecer a Deus, porque Deus quis que o não conhecemos, por isso se nos não mostrou. Sejamos simples e calmos, como os regatos e as árvores, e Deus amar-nos a fazendo de nós belos como as árvores e os regatos, e dar-nos a verdor na sua primavera, e rio aonde ir ter quando acabemos. So thinking of God is to disobey God, because God did not want us to know Him. That's why He didn't show Himself. Being simple and pacific, like the trees, and God would love us, making us beautiful like the trees, and would give us verdure in our spring, and a river where we will finish. A river to be when we are finished. Yeah, it's hard to just choose a few, but I think I'm going to have to cut out a few that I wanted to read because I'm worried that this is going to be a bit painful for you guys to listen to, but I hope I'm doing okay. O tejo é mais belo que o rio que corre pela minha aldeia. Mas o tejo não é mais belo que o rio que corre pela minha aldeia. Porque o tejo não é o rio que corre pela minha aldeia. O tejo tem grandes navios e navega nele ainda, pero aqueles que veem em tudo e que ela não está, em memória das nuas. O tejo desce de Espanha, o tejo entra no mar em Portugal. Toda a gente sabe isso, mas poucos sabem qual é o rio da minha aldeia, e para onde ele vai e donde ele vem. E por isso, porque pertence a menos gente, el mais livre e maior o rio da minha aldeia. So it's talking about how there's a river, the Tajo or Tejo, that's a big river that goes through Spain and Portugal, from what I can tell from the poem. I actually don't know the geography. And then he's also saying that he's comparing it to his little river from his village, at least Alberto Caeiro. I don't think this is Fernando Pessoa. Alberto Caeiro is like a fictional heteronym that he's writing under. So he's comparing it to the little river in his village and saying that, the very few know about his river, but it's bigger than the Tejo because it's got more space and it belongs to fewer people, so that the people can kind of in their hearts own a bigger part of it, and it's freer. I don't know. I just really like that one and like the rhythm and everything. So let me see. We'll go to see if I like 24. Another short one. O mistério das coisas, onde está ele? Onde está ele que não aparece? Pelo menos a mostrar-nos que é mistério, que sabe o rio ou que sabe a árvore, e que não sou mais do que eles, que sei disso. Oh, there's more. Sempre que olho para as coisas e penso no que os homens pensam de elas, rio como regato que sal fresca numa pedra. Porque o único sentido oculto das coisas é elas não terem sentido oculto nenhum. É mais estranho do que todas as estranhezas e do que os sonhos de todos os poetas e os pensamentos de todos os filósofos, que as coisas sejam realmente o que parecem ser e não haja nada que compreender. Se mais o que os meus sentidos aprenderem sozinhos, as coisas não têm significação, têm existência. As coisas são o único sentido oculto das coisas. And I think what I really liked about this one was just the last line, 2 lines there. The things do not have meaning, they have existence. The things are the only meaning, the only hidden meaning of things. Things are the only hidden meaning of things. It sounds much better in Portuguese. And it's really incredible how, like, I know translated poetry can be appreciated, but you're not reading the same poetry as the original. And I'm not saying, it can be equally good or whatever, but it's different. It really is different. Even the difference, there's even significant differences that I noticed in this book between Spanish and Portuguese, reading it in the original and then the Spanish side, but it's a lot less because the languages are much closer than, my poor English translations that I'm doing here. So, this one is lovely. Number 27. Antes o voo da ave, que passa anal desse rasto, que a passagem do animal que fica lembrada no chão. A ave passa e esquece, e assim deve ser. O animal onde já não está, e por isso de nada serve, mostra que já esteve, o que não serve para nada. A recordação é uma traição à natureza, porque a natureza de tem não é natureza. O que foi não é nada, e lembrar é não ver. Passa, ave, passa, e ensina-me a passar. And that's before the flight of the bird that passes and doesn't leave a trace, and the steps of the animal that leaves a memory in the soil. The bird passes and forgets, and that's how it should be. The animal, where it isn't, and for that it serves, shows where it was before, which serves for nothing. The memory is a betrayal of nature, because nature of yesterday is not nature. What has been is nothing, and remembering is not seeing. Pass, bird, pass, and teach me to pass. Num dia excessivamente nítido, dia em que dava a vontade de ter trabalhado muito, para nele não trabalhar nada, entrevi como uma estrada por entre as árvores o que talvez seja o grande segredo, aquele grande mistério de que os poetas falsos falam. Vi que não há natureza, que natureza não existe, que há montes, vales, planícies, que há árvores, flores, ervas, que há rios e pedras, mas que não há todo a que isso pertença, que conjunto real e verdadeiro é uma doença das nossas ideias. A natureza é parte sem todo. Isto é talvez o tal mistério de que falam. Foi isto o que, sem pensar nem parar, acertei que devia ser a verdade que todos andam a achar e que não acham, e que sou eu, porque a não fui achar, achei. The passage I really found intriguing about this one was that second stanza where he says, I saw that there is no nature, that nature does not exist, that there are mountains, valleys, plains, trees, flowers, rivers, stones, but there's not a whole to which this all pertains, that it's a conjunto, a real and true gathering, and it's a sickness of our ideas. Nature is parts without a whole. This perhaps is the mystery of which they speak. I found that absolutely fascinating because I was thinking, when one speaks like I have before about seeing the universe as a whole, philosophically, again, that discussion of the absolute, I think of how for everything to be one and actually function, really what that means is that everything, that there is no whole, that it's separate. It's like when you essentialize one thing, you're forced to see the reality of the separateness. I don't know. It's I don't even know. That probably didn't make any sense. Forget it. Okay. 31. There's one I feel like I passed over here where he actually makes a reference to the fact that he's Alberto Caeiro, like Fernando Pessoa with the words of Alberto Caeiro kind of acknowledges that what he writes could be seen as materialist, and he kind of tries to claim that he's not a materialist, but just by doing that, it's like, I found it so strange because I was already thinking about how Alberto Caeiro to me represents this sort of spiritual, this positive materialism, this this idea of this is all there is. This world, what we see and what we experience is just all there is. And it reminds me very much of the writing of like Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials, and things that he said in critical essays and things that was really the only true challenge to my sort of Christian upbringing, and made me realize that not only, or start thinking about the fact that to be a moral person in the world, it's like not only do you have to, like, to have any basis for morality, like you can just follow a religion, that's fine, and be a moral person and follow certain rules and things, but to be like a positive moral atheist is actually possible. And while I'm not necessarily going to put myself completely into that, I think everything about Alberto Caeiro that resonated with me kind of hit on the same thing that reaches very far back, back into middle school. And yeah, I wanted to mention that, but I couldn't find the exact poem where he says that. Now, oh, I think it's in the next section. Oh my gosh, that was only one section. So I really think I have to kind of unfortunately skip a lot of poemas in conjuntos because I spent a lot of time on those. No basta abrir la ventana. Oh, I'm reading it in Spanish. Não basta abrir a janela para ver os campos e o rio. Não é bastante não ser cego para ver as árvores e as flores. É preciso também não ter filosofia nenhuma. Com filosofia não há árvores, há ideias apenas. Há só cada de nós como uma cave. Há só uma janela fechada e todo o mundo lá fora é sonho do que se poderia ver se a janela se abrisse, que nunca é o que se vê quando se abre a janela. It's not enough to open the window to see the fields and the river. It's not enough to be blind to see the trees and the flowers. It's also necessary to not have any philosophy. With philosophy, there are no trees. There's nothing more than ideas. That's the first part of that poem. It definitely resonates with my skepticism of philosophy as a means to come to some kind of absolute truth about life. But I don't know. I still think the discussion and exploration of philosophy is valuable on some level. A espantosa realidade das coisas é a minha descoberta de todos os dias. I'm going to skip some things. Basta existir para se ser completo. It's enough to exist to be complete. Tenho escrito bastantes poemas. He de escrever muitos mais naturalmente. La manera de estar sucio de este niño es... Oh yes, I just went into the Spanish section. Tenho escrito bastantes poemas. Okay. This is a really good poem, but again, I'm just kind of trying to go fast. I'm trying to find that one where he calls himself, or defends himself that he's not a materialist. It's just it's a very different kind of oh, here it is. Yeah, at the end of this one. Uma vez chamaram me poeta materialista, e eu admirei-me porque não julgava que se me pudesse chamar qualquer coisa. E não sequer sou poeta, vejo. Se o que escrevo tem valor, não sou eu que o tenho. O valor está ali, nos meus versos. Tudo isso é absolutamente independente da minha vontade. So once they called me a materialist poet. Strange to me because I didn't think that they could call me anything. I'm not even a poet, I see. If what I write has value, I'm not the one who has it. The value is there in the verses. All this is absolutely independent of my will. Which is like an extremely, I don't know, materialist thing to say. But it's materialism with this sort of like everything is its own separate entity. And it clearly does not see writing the poetry as an act of free will or anything disciplined or intentional. At least not in the intentional in the sense of meaning or trying to be any kind of ism such as materialism. Although, if I had to call it something, I mean, that's really what this is. It's spiritual materialism. It's positive materialism. He calls himself nature's only poet in one. I just want to kind of go to the... I found the last... oh, yeah. I'll read one more and then I'll go to the very last one, which is short. So we're almost done here. Quando está frio no tempo do frio, para mim é como se estivesse agradável. Porque para o meu ser adequado à existência das coisas, o natural e o agradável, só por ser natural. Aceito as dificuldades da vida porque são o destino. Como aceito o frio excessivo no alto do inverno, calmamente sem me queixar, como quem meramente aceita, e encontra uma alegria no facto de aceitar, no facto sublimamente científico e difícil de aceitar o natural inevitável. Que são para mim as doenças que tenho e o mal que me acontece, senhal o inverno da minha pessoa e da minha vida, o inverno irregular, cujas leis de aparecimento desconheço, mas que existe para mim em virtude da mesma fatalidade sublime, da mesma inevitável exterioridade a mim, que é calor da terra no alto de verão, e o frio da terra no cimo do inverno. Aceito por personalidade, nasci sujeito como os outros a erros e a defeitos, mas nunca ao erro de querer compreender demais, nunca ao erro de querer compreender só como a inteligência, nunca ao defeito de exigir do mundo que fosse qualquer coisa que não fosse a mundo. I love that last line, and this is probably my second favorite, so the two parts in this that I just really love is What are for me the sicknesses that I suffer and the bad that happens to me, but the winters of my person and my life? And then the second, the ending lines are just such, they hit me really hard. I accept for character. I was born subject to all the errors and defects, but never the error of wanting to understand too much. Never the error of understanding only with intelligence. Never the defect to demand of the world something that isn't the world, that the world is not. Never to demand something of the world that the world is not. And it's in my mind in Portuguese. Nunca o defeito de exigir do mundo que fosse qualquer coisa que não fosse o mundo. I'm committing that one to memory. I think this poem needs to be with me. I guess it's, there's almost something about being in the moment, this very much the living in the now that is part of this all too. I don't want to say there's something Buddhist about it, but it is a little bit. The last one, number 13 of this second collection, which is, I don't think I even said it, is Poemas in Conjuntos, 1913 to 1915. Es talvez el último día de mi vida. Oh, I just started in Spanish and I was doing it with like a Portuguese. All right, let's start that over. E talvez o último dia da minha vida. Surge o sol, levantando a mão direita. Let me start again. E talvez o último dia da minha vida. Surge o sol, levantando a mão direita. Mas não o saude para lhe dizer adeus. Fiz sinal de gostar de ouvir ainda mais nada. This is a really perplexing ending, and it almost gives you the sense that this is his final poem before he passes away. That has some really tricky pronunciation in it, if you couldn't tell. But anyway, it's the translation is, this is perhaps my last day of life. I waved to the sun, raising my right hand, but I didn't wave saying goodbye. I did it as a sign to enjoy seeing it before. That's all. I don't know what that antes or ainda, before. In the Spanish side, it says, he hecho un signo de gustarme verlo antes, nada más. The Portuguese side, fiz sinal de gustar de ouvir ainda mais nada. Ainda mais nada. There may be a way that that's being used that I don't understand, but to me, the meaning I get out of it is he's dying, but he's not waving goodbye to the sun. He's just enjoying seeing it, which is in tune, I suppose, with everything else he has said about how he perceives and lives life. He simply sees things as they are. This is all there is. There is no other meaning to things except existence. So I guess it's also very existential, but to end this video, I wanted to share something that was in the introduction, written in Spanish. I hope I'll be able to translate it decently. But it was actually something that Ricardo Reis, another heteronym of Fernando Pessoa, wrote about Alberto Caeiro. I had no idea that his heteronyms actually wrote about each other. That is absolutely fascinating. And I'm trying to find that right now. Oh, here it is. The work of Caeiro represents the integral reconstruction of paganism in its absolute essence, in a way that neither the Greeks nor the Romans that lived in it, and for that they didn't think about it, would have done. The work, regardless, and its paganism were not thought about nor felt. They arrived as they arrived in our most profound wait, I can't how do we do this? So, ni fueron ni pensados ni siquiera sentidos, llegaron como lo que sea lo que quiera, es en nosotros más profundo que el sentimiento o la razón. They arrived like how they arrived how they wanted in our deepest feelings or reason. I don't know. I'm having a really hard time translating it. Like, I get it, but I just don't know how to put it into English. So for Caeiro, absolute objectivist, the pagan gods were a deformation of paganism. An absolute objectivist, the gods were los dioses estaban ya de más en su. The gods were superfluous in his objectivism. Well, he sees that they were made in an image and similar to the material things, but they weren't material things, and that was enough for them to be nothing. Okay, yeah, something like that. Anyway, I've done my best with the poet is a pretender, is how that El Poeta es un fingidor is the name of this too dark anthology, and the parts of Alberto Caeiro in it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm doubting whether I got across how and why this really affected me, and if it's something others can resonate with. It was obviously a challenge, but you know, I'll put the video up. Hope someone enjoys it, and we'll do more poetry. I think I'm definitely gonna try to work on my Portuguese and read more things in Portuguese and get a new box on my brain for it, so that I'm not just sounding like it's half Portuguese and half Spanish. So thanks for watching if you made it to the end, and take care. We'll see you next time on Mike Reads the World. Can't wait to do some more poetry. Take care.